Estamos de volta com o CertForum 2022 ao vivo, direto de Brasília, nesta quinta-feira, 23 de junho. E antes de convidar os participantes do próximo painel, informo que as perguntas feitas através do chat da plataforma serão registradas pela Assessoria de Comunicação do ITI e posteriormente respondidas por meio de texto no site do Instituto. Para compor a mesa Algoritmos pós-quânticos, convido o matemático da Divisão de Segurança da Computação do Instituto Nacional de Padrões e Tecnologia, Dr. Dustin Mood, o secretário executivo da Câmara Executiva Federal de Identificação do Cidadão, da Secretaria Especial de Modernização do Estado da Secretaria-Geral da Presidência da República, Eduardo Lacerda, o pesquisador do Laboratório de Segurança de Computadores na Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina, professor Jean Martina, o membro do Comitê Gestor da ICP Brasil e presidente do Conselho Diretor da Associação Brasileira das Indústrias de Materiais de Defesa e Segurança, Roberto Galo, o diretor de Infraestrutura de Chaves Públicas Brasileira do ITI, Maurício Coelho, o diretor-presidente do ITI, Carlos Fortner. Para moderar a mesa, passo a palavra ao senhor Maurício Coelho.
Ok. Ok. Muito obrigado, Juliana. Boa tarde a todos, a todas. Meu boa tarde também aqui ao Dustin Moody, Eduardo Lacerda, meu amigo, presidente Fortner, que nos prestigia acompanhando parceiro e amigo, professor Jean Martina, nosso parceiro também, Roberto Galo, né, nesse painel. Muito obrigado a presença e a participação de vocês. Assim, rapidamente, vou passar a palavra ao diretor-presidente do ITI, Carlos Fortner, para nos dar uma saudação institucional antes da gente efetivamente entrar nos trabalhos do painel. Com você, Carlos.
Obrigado, Maurício. Boa tarde, Lacerda. Boa tarde, Galo. Dustin, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Jean Martina, boa tarde. Bom, eu queria fazer uma breve fala institucional, dizendo da importância do ITI estar atento aí para as tendências da criptografia. Essa palestra aqui, esse painel vai ser um painel bastante técnico, mas trazendo bastante visão de futuro, o que está para acontecer. O nome do painel em português é O Fim Está Próximo, e vocês vão ver a importância disso para a tecnologia futura da criptografia e tudo isso que vai acontecer nos próximos anos dentro da ICP. Então, boa tarde a todos, um feliz evento para todos nós. Obrigado.
Obrigado, Fortner. Bom, pessoal, os especialistas são o Dustin, o Lacerda, o Jean, o Galo. Nós vamos deixar para que eles possam falar com mais propriedade do que a gente sobre essa temática. Vou fazer uma breve, uma rápida introdução ao tema, ao painel. Né? E de pronto, aqui, mais uma vez, gostaria de agradecer, né, a presença daqueles que nos prestigiam aí com sua atenção nesta tarde, no painel desta tarde aqui, sobre algoritmos pós-quânticos, um tema bastante técnico, muito árido, né? Mas trata-se de assunto extremamente relevante e urgente para nós, prestadores de serviço de certificação digital, né, o caso da ICP Brasil, e também, né, para todos aqueles que se valem do uso de criptografia em suas aplicações e sistemas de informação. A tecnologia quântica ela é um campo emergente da física e da engenharia que explora princípios da física quântica, como o emaranhamento, né, o entanglement, a superposição, superposition, e o tunelamento quântico, né, o tunneling, para fornecer, então, novos paradigmas, novas aplicações. Então, vamos da computação quântica, das comunicações, a metrologia, processamento de imagens, pesquisas. Nas últimas 2 décadas, principalmente, trouxeram aí alguns resultados já tangíveis, outros nem tão tangíveis assim, mas a crença, né, se acredita que teremos, né, uma verdadeira revolução com o advento aí da computação quântica para lidar com problemas complexos. Fato é que temos investimentos vultosos hoje sendo aplicados em pesquisa e desenvolvimento nessa área, seja por estados nacionais, Estados Unidos, China, Japão, Canadá, Europa, né, e também representantes grandes, importantes da indústria da tecnologia da informação, o Google, a Amazon, a Microsoft, a IBM, né, todos eles fazendo anúncios aí, né, com bastante frequência já da evolução dos seus trabalhos. A tecnologia quântica, em particular a computação quântica, ela é vista como uma inovação disruptiva, né? A gente teve lá, em meados dos anos 90, cientistas que conseguiram teorizar algoritmos, né, para computadores quânticos, que, pressupondo, né, a existência de um computador quântico com suficientemente poder computacional, poderá quebrar, né, os esquemas de criptografia de chaves públicas amplamente utilizados atualmente, como o caso da RSA, ou mesmo das curvas elípticas, ou ainda enfraquecer também os algoritmos de criptografia simétrica já padronizados. Enquanto não sabemos ao certo quando, né, a tal máquina quântica estará disponível, ao menos disponível com poder computacional suficiente, pesquisadores e autoridades nacionais e internacionais vêm trabalhando intensamente nessa busca por soluções que possam prevenir este caos, né, um caos que poderia ou poderá advir desse cenário de quebra dos algoritmos hoje utilizados. Uma das principais iniciativas, se não a principal, em andamento nesse sentido, é o projeto para padronizar algoritmos pós-quânticos ou algoritmos de criptografia de chaves públicas resistentes à computação quântica, né? Está sendo conduzido pelo NIST, o National Institute of Standards and Technology, dos Estados Unidos, e que nosso principal convidado de hoje é justamente o líder desse projeto, o Dr. Dustin Moody, que nos trará, então, uma atualização do estágio atual do projeto. Switching gears to English now, our main guest, whom we thank for having accepted our invitation, and whose participation we are very honored by, is Dr. Dustin Moody. He's a mathematician in the NIST Computer Security Division, where he leads the post-quantum cryptography project. He received his PhD from the University of Washington in 2009. His area of research deals with elliptic curves and their applications in cryptography. Dustin, you are very welcome, and the show is yours. The show is yours. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Mauricio. I hope everyone can see that fine.
Yes, it's okay for me.
Great. Fiquei muito feliz em receber este convite para falar com vocês. Eu falo português, mas faz tempo que eu falei muito, então eu vou falar em inglês. Desculpe. So today I'm going to talk about post-quantum cryptography, as in Mauricio provided a great introduction to give us an idea about that, and talk about the project that the National Institute of Standards and Technology has to help us get ready to protect our information from quantum computers. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we are an agency of the United States government. We have around 6,000 employees at our headquarters that do research in a variety of different areas of science. The part I am in is the Computer Security Division, where we focus on cryptography and cybersecurity and making sure we can protect information of the United States government. But we know that the cryptography that we standardize and use also gets used widely around the world and in industry and in many other places. So the topic for today, of course, deals with the threat that quantum computers pose. You've probably heard of a quantum computer by now. In the news and in the media, we see more and more headlines of companies that are racing to build quantum computers, governments that are investing lots of money, and people are making a lot of progress towards building quantum computers. And I'll talk about the threat that they pose, what they are, and what we're doing about it, and maybe some things that you can start doing as well. So what is a quantum computer? I'm not going to give a very technical answer. In the past few decades, there's been a lot of research to build a quantum computer. And the idea behind them is, instead of using the classical physics that a lot of us learned when we were in school, quantum computers use quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics have a lot of very interesting and unusual properties. If researchers are able to build such a computer, they would be able to harness huge increases in computational power, and we would be able to tackle some problems that are too hard to do with our current computing technology. Quantum computers use what are called qubits instead of the traditional bits, which are either a 0 or a 1. Qubit stands for quantum bit. And the interesting thing about a qubit is that you can put quantum particles, you can entangle them and put them into superposition so that a quantum bit can hold both the state of a 0 and a 1 at the same time. So if you're able to string together a whole bunch of qubits and design an algorithm, you could have an algorithm that tests a huge number of possibilities using qubits that it would be impossible to do using our current classical computers. Now, there are some limitations of quantum computers. They're the intersection of a lot of different research and engineering and physics and science fields that have to come together to build these things. They're working with very, very small particles. Oftentimes, they have to work on these in temperatures that are near absolute zero and in a space that is created to be a vacuum. So the environment is also very challenging. Because of this, current quantum computers are fairly fragile. They're pretty small. And there's a lot of engineering to make these bigger, to figure out how to scale them up. Quantum computers will not solve every problem that we need to solve today. There are certain problems for which we have algorithms that are efficient on quantum computers, and we will get a lot of very good breakthroughs in science and a lot of very good applications in economics, designing medicines, logistics, in many areas that it'll be great to have a quantum computer for. But they won't ever solve all of our problems. They also will, it's unlikely that they will replace all of the computers that we have today. We have phones, we have all sorts of devices that we carry around. Quantum computers use specialized technology and are more expensive. So we'll likely have quantum computers alongside our classical computers as well. Now, the reason that we talk about quantum computers with cryptography is that there are two algorithms that were discovered over 20 years ago that would have a big impact in the field of cryptography. The first is due to Peter Shor that was discovered in 1994, and he discovered an algorithm that would work on a quantum computer and would give you an exponential speed up over classical computers to solve two different mathematical problems. The first one is in factoring large integers. So I think in our head, we can all factor 35 is equal to 5 times 7. That's pretty easy. But when the numbers get into the hundreds of digits, it's very, very hard for a computer to factor a number into its prime factors. We have a crypto system that's based on that hard problem called RSA. Shor's algorithm would be able to break that crypto system. Similarly, there's a second mathematical problem called the discrete log problem that Shor's algorithm would also be able to break if we had a big enough quantum computer. Turns out there are other crypto systems that are based on the discrete log problem being a hard problem for computers to solve. And then 2 years later, in 1996, there was another algorithm discovered by Love Grover. This algorithm was a bit more general, and it gave, instead of an exponential speedup, it was a polynomial speedup in unstructured search. So instead of an algorithm that would take O of n steps to, say, search through a table, if you use Grover's algorithm on a quantum computer, you could do that search in O of square root of n steps. And of course, that can speed up things like brute force key searches. So to be a little more concrete about the effect that this would have on cryptography, At NIST, we have standardized a number of different crypto systems that people around the world use. Some of these are what are called public key crypto systems. Some of these are what are called symmetric key algorithms. And then there's various tools, things like random number generators, hash functions, that NIST has standards in all of these things. Well, as I mentioned on the previous slide, Shor's algorithm would break the integer factorization problem and the discrete log problem. That turns out that it would break all of the public key algorithms that are in wide use today. That includes RSA, the digital signature algorithm, DSA, elliptic curve cryptography, that's the ECDH and ECDSA, as well as the Diffie-Hellman algorithm. At NIST, those documents we have standardized in FIPS 186 and SP 856A and B, where you can do public key encryption, public key establishment, and public key digital signatures. So the threat is that once we have a large enough quantum computer, then all of those crypto systems will be completely broken and vulnerable, and we will not be able to use them to protect our data and information. Now, there's also an impact on the symmetric key algorithms like AES and SHA-2 and SHA-3. Due to Grover's algorithm, they would be affected as well, but less dramatically because it's a polynomial speedup and not an exponential speedup. So for AES, for example, we would need to use a longer key. Instead of using AES 128, we could use AES 256 to provide enough protection. And that's a lot easier to deal with because we don't have to replace the algorithm, we just need to use longer key sizes. So there is an impact there, but the focus of cryptographers is on the public key algorithms because we need to completely discover new algorithms that can be safely used and provide protection from both a classical and from a quantum computer. So the big question is, how soon do we need to worry about this problem? We don't yet have quantum computers. The ones that exist today are pretty small, so we might think that we could just push this problem off and just worry about it once we have a quantum computer that's big enough to break the crypto. But it turns out that's not a good idea. You can already be at risk today, even though quantum computers have not yet been built. The idea behind this threat is often referred to as harvest now, decrypt later. The idea is that somebody could take your data, which is encrypted now, and they could simply copy it and hold on to it. Now it's encrypted, so they can't crack it, they cannot break it or read it yet, but maybe they just hold on to that copy that they made and they wait until a quantum computer comes along. And if a quantum computer comes along pretty soon, then they could get access to your data before you were hoping that they would. You would not be providing the protection that you would like. And so then they could be able to decrypt it later and you would have a problem. So this idea is kind of shown in this theorem due to Dr. Michele Mosca, who's an expert in the field. And it illustrates it using three variables, X, Y, and Z. X is how long you need your data to be safe. That will depend on who you are. For dealing with financial regulations or privacy regulations, maybe X is 5 years, 7 years. If you're dealing with national security and state secrets, X could be a big number like 30 years or 50 years. Y is going to be how long it's going to take us to discover new algorithms that will protect us, get them standardized, and then get them adopted in products around the world. From our experience at NIST, Y is likely 10, 15, 20 years. It's never as quick as we'd like to transition to a new crypto algorithm. The variable Z stands for the time until the quantum computer is built that's big enough to run Shor's algorithm and break current levels of cryptography. So this theorem says that if x plus y is greater than z, then you're at risk to this harvest now, decrypt later threat. So if you put in different numbers for x and y and z, you can see what level of quantum risk you already have today, even though a quantum computer is not yet built. So I've talked a little about what x and y might be. The question then is, well, what is z? How long until we have a quantum computer? Nobody knows for sure. It's a research question, but there are signs that governments are taking notice and are worried about this threat. Just a month ago, the United States White House put out a national security memo to make sure that all federal agencies in the United States were aware of the threat due to quantum computing and making sure that they would start taking steps. NIST helped create this memo, so we, of course, have been working on this for a while, but it directs agencies to start developing plans that as soon as our NIST post-quantum cryptography standards are ready, they will have plans to transition to these algorithms. A little bit more concretely, like I said, nobody knows for certain how long until we have a quantum computer. This is a chart from a report that some experts did a survey on. They sent out surveys to around 50 people who are knowledgeable in the field and asked them, how long do you think it will be until we have a quantum computer that's big enough to break RSA 2048 in 24 hours? So I put the link to the chart at the bottom, but this kind of graphic here shows their main finding. So if we look at it, if you look at the bottom row, of those experts who were surveyed, only a very small number thought within 5 years we would have a quantum computer. That yellow bar represents less than a 1% chance. The 11 that's a little bit darker means less than a 5% chance. So most of those who were surveyed put the odds at very low that within 5 years we'll have a quantum computer. The odds stay pretty low even at 10 years, according to their best guesses. We see though, once we get to 15 years, about half of the experts feel that there's at least a 30% or greater chance that we could have a big enough quantum computer. So that's a risk that I think most professionals in the field, we can't ignore that risk. So this chart helps us understand that perhaps 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, this is the kind of time scale for a quantum computer to be built based on our current understanding right now. This could always change. There could always be a breakthrough in the field that accelerates the timeline. That's always possible. Now, I want to be clear as well, in talking about post-quantum cryptography, what I'm not talking about. When the words quantum and cryptography are often mentioned together, people are sometimes talking about a different thing. It's known as quantum cryptography or quantum key distribution. And that is the idea of using quantum technologies to build crypto systems. It's very interesting. You can get theoretical guarantees from the laws of physics to prove that they can be secure, at least theoretically. There are a number of limitations to QKD and quantum cryptography. It leads us to the conclusion that this is a useful application, but QKD and quantum crypto is not likely going to be what is widely scaled around the world and used by the majority of users for most applications and protocols. There are applications where it will be used and it will be important, but this is not what is the focus of the NIST post-quantum cryptography project. The goal of post-quantum cryptography is to find new crypto systems which will still run on our current classical computers, but will protect us from the threat of quantum computers. So that's kind of a different idea. Now, NIST has had a project in post-quantum cryptography, which is the name of this field. Sometimes it gets called quantum-resistant cryptography or quantum-safe cryptography. But for over a decade, we have had our team working on this, but it wasn't until around 2015, 2016 that we started taking some concrete steps to work towards having standards for post-quantum cryptography, which is a very important step. Many crypto algorithms will not be implemented and used and not be widely adopted until first there are industry standards, government standards to properly vet the crypto systems, and so that there's a standard way of implementing them. The project really got in gear in 2016 when we announced that we would be doing a large international, basically a competition to select new algorithms to replace the ones that would be broken. So we put out the call, and in 2017, we received 82 submissions back from around the world that we would be evaluating. Since then, we've evaluated these schemes in a series of rounds, and I'll give a little bit more information in the slides. But currently, we're towards the end of the third round of evaluation. At each round, we narrowed it down to a smaller number of algorithms to focus on. And as the third round is ending, we will announce the algorithms that we will standardize very soon. And then we will write up the standards and publish them so that everyone can begin using them. So I've got pictures here of most of the people on our NIST post-quantum cryptography team. We have a lot of experts in a variety of different backgrounds who have come together. I'm really grateful for this team. We have a lot of very good people. But even then, this team is pretty small for this task. So we're grateful as well to the people around the world, the larger cryptographic community, because they are doing a lot of the work and evaluation as well, and we couldn't do it without them. So this post-quantum cryptography competition is along the lines of what NIST has done in the past to standardize some cryptography. Over 20 years ago, we did a competition to select the block cipher that resulted in AES being standardized, which is now the most widely used encryption algorithm around the world. More recently, about 10 years ago, we had the SHA-3 competition to select a new hash function. Currently, right now, we are actually running two competitions at NIST, our post-quantum cryptography competition, and we're also running a lightweight cryptography competition, which is geared towards finding symmetric key algorithms which are suitable for lightweight devices, things that have low power requirements, things of that nature. Now, specifically what we called for when we announced this competition were public key digital signatures and public key encryption or key establishment algorithms. There are many interesting crypto functionalities that could be desirable, but we need to start first with the basic primitives that we need, like signatures and encryption in public key cryptography. NIST sees our role as managing this process of achieving community consensus in a transparent and a timely manner. We note that this competition is a lot more complicated than our past competitions for a variety of reasons. And at the end of it, we would not be picking a single algorithm to standardize. We would be picking a small number of algorithms. That's a small number of digital signatures, as well as a small number of encryption or key establishment algorithms. And the reason for that is because this is still a very active research field, and we need to make sure we have more than one algorithm ready in case some new research comes through and there's an attack or some kind of vulnerability discovered on one algorithm. We still have other algorithms that we will be able to use. So some of the complexities that I was mentioning, this is a broader scope. We're looking for 3 different functionalities, whereas before, like with SHA-3, we were looking just at hash functions. For this competition, we also need to be worried about both classical and quantum attacks, which is very new for what we've had to deal with. We need to look at both the theoretical security, look at things like security proofs and asymptotic results, but as well look at the practical aspect. What are the best known attacks? How long does it take to run them? How much memory does it take to run those attacks? We knew going in that there was going to have to be trade-offs because what we were seeing in the academic literature is that there was no silver bullet. There was no algorithm that was just perfect in every way. There were some algorithms that looked like they would do really well and they had small key size, but then their performance was a little bit slower, or vice versa. There was a variety of different trade-offs that we knew we'd have to consider. Because of this, this is going to give us some challenges when we move into migrating to these algorithms. A lot of them have larger key sizes. A lot of them use different mathematical techniques that are pretty complicated compared to what we're used to. So there will definitely be some challenges there. So how does NIST decide which algorithms that we will select? Well, we published what our selection criteria are. First is security against both classical and quantum attacks. Second, performance. This would be measured on a variety of different classical platforms, both high-end and low-end, both software and hardware. Performance also includes things like the public key size, the ciphertext size, the signature size. And then after those 2 main criteria, there's a number of other properties that are important, and it would be good if the algorithms have as many of these different properties as they can. Being a drop-in replacement, providing perfect forward secrecy, being resistant to side channel attacks, and so on and so forth. For security, we defined 5 security categories so that when submitters sent in parameters, we could try and quantify how much security they are providing. This was a difficult thing to do because there was not yet, and there still is not, a lot of consensus is the best way to measure a quantum attack. We do not yet have a quantum computer. We do not yet know how fast, how expensive it will be to run various attacks on a quantum computer. So we have to do the best we can, even though we don't have that. What we ended up doing is defining the 5 security levels in a way to compare them to how much security our current standardized algorithms have. So for example, an algorithm in security category 1 means you're providing as much security as it would take to break AES 128 doing exhaustive key search using the same amount of resources. So that's how we define the quantum and classical security levels there. It was very nice to see that this was a very international effort. When we looked at the submitters from around the world, there was submitters from over 25 different countries, including Brazil, 16 different states, and 6 different continents. The majority of the submitters were based, I would say, North America and Europe and Asia as well. The first round began in December 2017, and it lasted about a year. And there were 69 different algorithms that had met our requirements that we were evaluating. With those algorithms, there was about almost 300 submitters who were part of those teams. We held a workshop where all the submission teams were able to present their algorithms and explain their strengths and how they worked. Very interesting, though, in the first just couple of months, almost 25 of the schemes were broken or attacked. Post-quantum cryptography, like I said, is still a very new research field. And a lot of the ideas that were brought forth were not strong enough, and cryptographers from around the world were able to break a lot of them. After about a year, we selected the most promising 26 algorithms to move on into a second round. For the most part, these 26 algorithms represented the same types of algorithms that we saw in round one. We just picked a smaller number of them, the ones that seemed to be the best. So I put a chart down in the bottom right. A lot of the schemes that were submitted were based on what are called lattices. A lot were also based on codes. And then a smaller number were based on multivariate algebra and a few other different ideas. And those charts show you kind of the breakdown of how many signatures, how many encryption algorithms we receive for each of those different categories. Now, the second round was much like the first round in that NIST internally evaluated the algorithms, and cryptographers around the world as well evaluated the algorithms. We held a second workshop where teams again presented on their algorithms and other research was presented. During the second round, even though these were the 26 most promising algorithms, 7 of them were broken or attacked during the second round as well. Finally, at the end of the second round, after a lot of research and cryptanalysis and published work, a lot of benchmarking, NIST selected a smaller number to move on into the third round. And we issued a report to explain which algorithms were moving on, why we made those decisions, and so on and so forth. So in the third round, we have 7 finalists and 8 alternate algorithms that have been evaluated. The finalists are the ones that we want most people to be paying attention to because they are the ones that we thought would be ready for standardization at the end of the third round and would fit most applications. The alternates were algorithms that we were still interested in, but we thought they might need a fourth round of study, as well as the urgency to standardize them was not as pressing so that they could wait a little bit longer. So in this table on this slide, you can see the names of the different algorithms. They've got some fun names from science fiction and movies, things like Kyber and Saber, dilithium, a variety of fun names that cryptographers like to choose for these different algorithms. So just to describe the algorithms a little bit, again, I don't want to go very technical. 3 of the finalist algorithms for chems, what's key encapsulation mechanism, or that's equivalently encryption. Kyber, Entru, and Saber are all based on what are called structured lattices. These 3 algorithms are the best general purpose algorithms that we have seen in our PQC competition. They all have really good performance. They're very good all around. They're quite efficient. Because they're based on similar ideas, NIST expects to select at most one of these 3 finalists for standardization at the end of the third round. There were 2 other lattice algorithms that were alternates, Entru Prime and FrodoChem. Entru Prime was also based on structured lattices, but made some different design choices. FrodoChem did a different security performance trade-off. Instead of using structured lattice, they used unstructured lattices, which made their key sizes and performance a little bit worse, but is widely viewed as being a little bit more conservative in terms of security. There were 4 other chems still in the third round. One of them was a finalist. It's based on code-based cryptography. And it's actually an idea that's been around for a very long time. It was first published back in 1978 and is still unbroken. And no quantum algorithms are known to attack it either. Classic Bequeath is very interesting that it has huge public keys, like on the order of a megabyte or 2, but its ciphertexts are the smallest out of all the algorithms, just a couple hundred bytes. We did have two smaller code-based algorithms, Bike and HQC. They introduced some structure which reduces the key sizes to be a lot smaller than classic McLeese. We expect that we will, at the end of the fourth round, likely choose one of those algorithms for standardization also. And then there was one final chem called Psych that's based on what are called isogenies of elliptic curves. Psych has an interesting profile. It has very small key and ciphertext sizes. However, it pays for it in performance. It's slower than all of its other competitors out of the chem category. If we look at the signatures, we have 6 signatures that were still in our round 3 process. 2 of them, the finalists dilithium and falcon, are both based on structured lattices. And just like in the chem case, we view these as the most promising algorithms, the most general purpose, what most people will be using. Both have very good all-around performance. Then we had 2 other signatures, Picnic and Sphinx Plus, that are based on different ideas from symmetric key cryptography. Picnic was a very interesting design. I don't think anyone had quite seen anything like Picnic when it was submitted to us. Sphinx Plus was based on an older idea, based on using hash functions, and its security is very well understood because of this. It's a little bit bigger and slower than dilithium and falcon. And then the third category was multivariate, and we had 2 signatures, Rainbow and Gems. Rainbow was seen as a little bit better, so it was a finalist, while Gems was an alternate. They both have large public keys and small signatures. Now, during the third round, we only had 6 signatures, and within the first few months, we saw some of those signatures get attacked. Both Gems and Rainbow had attacks that occurred during the third round. Rainbow even had a further break just a few months back with a nice paper titled Breaking Rainbow in a Weekend on a Laptop. So because of the fact that we have a smaller number of signature schemes, about a year and a half ago, NIST asked for feedback on some actions that we might take to help this situation. We mentioned that we might want to standardize Sphinx Plus after the third round, even though it was an alternate and not a finalist. And we also mentioned it was likely that we would introduce a mechanism to consider new signature schemes at some point in the future. Now, as NIST is making its decisions for which schemes to evaluate, we will follow the evaluation criteria that I already talked about. We used it to go from the first round to a smaller number in the second round, and from the second round to a smaller number in the third round. For the lattice chems, the main decision we will make will be choosing between Kyber, Entru, and Sabre. And we expect that whatever we standardize out of those 3 will be the main chem or encryption algorithm that most people will use to provide quantum protection. And similarly, the main choice for signatures will be looking at dilithium and falcon. All of the other algorithms will kind of be selected on their own merits. It'll be their own decision. I think I'll skip these slides. These show a little bit some of the kind of the technical details between Kyber and Entru and Sabre, but I don't think we need to get into it too much. They all are based in structured lattices, but there are differences between them, of course. Similarly, between dilithium and falcon. I will point out here on these charts that dilithium and falcon have some different properties, though. In the graph on the left, it's a graph of performance, looking at the size of the public key plus the signature size. And you can see that falcon is quite a bit smaller than dilithium. And if you look at the performance in the chart on the right as well, again, falcon beats dilithium pretty nicely. So it might seem that falcon would be the obvious better choice to choose, But it turns out Falcon has a much more complex implementation that could be a challenge for many applications. Dilithium is very much easier to implement, uses things like uniform sampling instead of Gaussian sampling. So there's kind of some trade-offs in looking at Falcon and dilithium. I want to mention another important factor that's played a role in the NIST decision process. Anyone who works with cryptography in industry knows that if there are patents on cryptography, that's a factor that makes it hard for algorithms to get widespread adoption. And so NIST very much wants to select algorithms which can be widely adopted around the world. So we want to select algorithms that do not have any patent worries or any IPR, intellectual property rights issues. It turns out some of the algorithms involved in our process did have some patent and IPR issues that we've been working very hard to clear up so that these algorithms will be able to be used around the world. It's a very complicated area, and we can't guarantee any solutions because we're working with other parties and we can't control the actions that they take. So during the third round, if you were kind of involved in the process, I'm sure you saw a lot of discussion on this topic and the impact that any patents and IPR would have on adoption. I'm happy to say, though, I think we will have resolved these issues by the time we have standardized the algorithms. So that's a good thing. For our timeline, the third round will end literally any day now. It was actually supposed to end a couple months back. We were anticipating giving our announcement of the algorithms we would standardize. Because this is a big decision for NIST, we had to kind of get approval from some people higher up in the government, and they ended up taking a longer time than we expected, which delayed it a little bit. I'm very hopeful that within the next week or two, we will have our announcement and we'll be able to publish that. And it will announce which of the finalist algorithms we will standardize, including potentially Sphinx Plus. We will also publish a report to explain why we selected those algorithms and the properties that they have. We will also announce any candidates that are advancing to a fourth round of study. When it'll also have some more information, like we'll hold a workshop later on this year. But the overall timeline is that we will draft these public standards, and that takes a year or two to do. We work with the submission team and we get public feedback on that. We'll post our draft once we've written it and get public feedback on that before we then finalize and publish it. And we expect the first set of standards to be done by 2024. So that's when we can have the algorithms published, standardized, ready to start getting put into products. Yeah, this just talks about the standardization, like I was just saying there. It takes some time to carefully write up the specification to make sure that there's no mistakes, and that when people follow the standard and implement it correctly, they will be able to securely have all the security properties that they wish. They will be standardized in some FIPS or special publication, SP documents. As I mentioned before as well, one thing we're doing is we will also very soon have a call for more signature algorithms. This is like another little competition that we will be running. This will be a much smaller project. We're not looking to start all over. The main goal of this call for signatures is to look for general purpose signature algorithms that are not based on structured lattices, so that we have something to complement dilithium or Falcon. We don't want to put all our eggs in the lattice basket, just in case some attack comes that threatens lattices. We need to have other algorithms ready to go. So this often gets called the on-ramp for signatures, and later this summer, you can expect to see a call for new signatures for this process. There are a lot of different research challenges that academics in the field still have to look at. Don't think we need to dig into them, but it is a very active research field. There are lots of questions that we don't know the answers to. And so there's a lot of studies still to be done. I do want to mention there are some crypto algorithms which provide protection against quantum computers that have already been standardized. These are called stateful hash-based signature schemes, and they've been around since the 1970s. They were standardized by the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, a few years back, and then NIST also standardized the same algorithms, XMSS and LMS. Now, some caution is needed that these are not general purpose digital signature algorithms that can be used by any application. They're called stateful because you have to manage the state inside the implementation very, very carefully. Any mistake and you completely break your security. So the documents describe how to do that and why only certain applications can do this. For example, code signing is something that you could use stateful hash-based signatures for. So that they are an algorithm that if you fall within their scope, there's already a solution ready that could be used. There's a lot of interest in a hybrid mode. That's the idea that when we standardize a post-quantum scheme, that we would combine it with a current classical standardized algorithm because we don't yet maybe have full confidence in the PQC algorithms. So industry is talking a lot about this as we have discussions with them, and want to point out that there's a way that you can do that we've already put in one of our NIST standards to have a hybrid key. You basically generate your two shared secrets using a PQC algorithm and a normal classical algorithm, concatenate them, run them through a KDF, and that will still pass NIST FIPS validation process. Now, there will be a transition to these algorithms. NIST has issued guidance on crypto transitions in the past with things like triple key DES, SHA-1. Once we have the PQC standards, we will also publish guidance and timelines for when you need to transition to these algorithms to be safe. NIST also has a project to help organizations get ready for this transition and migration. The National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, the NCCOE, is a little bit more focused on the applications, and they've developed a project in partnership with the Department of Homeland Security to work on this. So they will have papers and guidance and software that you could use so that organizations can start preparing for the transition even before a quantum computer is here or before standards are available. So if you'd like more information on that, there's links here, or if you just Google NCCOE and post-quantum, it's very easy to find as well. So NIST is one standard organization, but there are many other standard organizations around the world who are working on this, and I've listed some of these here. IEEE P1363, IATF, ETSI, ISO, the International Standards Organization. All of these organizations recognize the threat from quantum computers and have PQC algorithms that they're working on. It has been very nice to see that all of them have been communicating and talking to us at NIST, and that most people have been focused on the NIST effort to make that as strong as possible and are waiting to see the outcome of the NIST post-quantum crypto project. So what are some things some organizations can do now? If you understand that there's a threat from quantum computers, the first step would be to perform a quantum risk assessment for your organization. Figure out what information you have that's protected by cryptography What type of cryptography is protecting it? Are you using public key algorithms? Are you using symmetric key algorithms? Figure out what X, Y, and Z are for you in your situation. That'll help you determine your quantum risk. And start planning and prioritizing activities so that you'll be able to migrate to the quantum safe solutions as they become standardized. Make sure you're looking at vendor products. Make sure your vendors are aware of the threat, and start exploring any that have quantum safe features. Make sure your IT staff are aware of what's going on, that there are new crypto algorithms that they might want to start exploring. A lot of these crypto algorithms have bigger key sizes and things like that, so it's definitely good to know ahead of time. We encourage people to track developments in quantum computing, as well as our standard project, so that you can keep your timeline up to date. But mostly, it just involves acting now and not waiting to create a plan so there's somebody in charge of this task, and that they are planning for this transition and prioritizing activities. It will not be easy. It will be expensive. It will be hard. There will be all sorts of challenges. But the sooner that an organization plans and prepares for that, the less mistakes they will have later if they have to rush and scramble. So in conclusion, it's nice to see there's some light at the end of the tunnel. We very, very soon will have the algorithms that will be standardized. NIST is very grateful for everybody's efforts around the world and in the crypto community. And for more information, we have a website you can check out, as well as we have a PQC forum, which is an online mailing list, a discussion group that you can sign up for to keep track of the discussion. There's announcements, there's questions on there. And if you want to stay up to date on what's going on with our project, that's what I would do, is sign up for that forum. So with that, again, I'd like to say thank you very much for the invitation to talk about our project. And I look forward to answering any questions as well as our panel discussion that we'll have. Thank you.
Dustin, thank you very much for your presentation. Great presentation. It was extremely enlightening. And we are very, very anxious to know the results of the competition, the new algorithms that will be standardized very soon, as you are talking about. In the sequence of the panel, we will have 3 other guests, also specialists in the topic of our panel today, who will briefly present their impressions and interact with you about what you presented, okay? Primeiro, eu vou convidar aqui o Eduardo Lacerda, inclusive ele tem uma agenda se aproximando, e vou priorizar então para que ele possa participar conosco nesse momento, e depois a gente dá sequência. Então, Lacerda, por favor, a palavra é sua.
Obrigado, Maurício. Boa tarde a todos. Dustin, thanks a lot for this presentation. I have a number of questions to ask Dustin to chat with you, but I will start with one that maybe guides the others. We have seen lately many crypto analysis in most varied teams, right? So Top team presented some improvements to the dual lattice attack, reducing securities from LWE, LWR based finalists. We have Antonav's collisions attack that pushes Sphinx teams to replace for SHA-512 to the security level 3 and 5. We have a lot of best area to explore inside channels attack, including the latest discussion about remote frequency and another stuff going on, patent issues, like you said. Despite the rainbow was totally crashing level 1, like you said, and this is a big concern. But I want to hear about you in this first place. What your biggest concern today about this all crypto analysis going on, about everything that's coming? What will be the next biggest concern today, or do you think that all this will be part of our world itself? We have to consider that everything is very new and that we have to mature together in this process of finding the best algorithms for a given application and stuff like that. I mean, what you're discussing in the coffee area about this report, about everything that your guys are doing there?
Yeah, excellent question. What are our big worries? A lot of those attacks you mentioned definitely are big things that we worry about. You mentioned there have been some attacks on the lattice schemes, on Sphinx Plus, on Rainbow, on GEMS. And a lot of that is to be expected. When you run a competition, cryptographers try and attack the schemes, and they're often successful. They're very smart people. Post-quantum cryptography is also very much a research field, so it's expected that we will continue to see new results. And that's one of the challenges, of course. So yeah, those are worries. It depends on the severity of the attack. Like for Rainbow, it was a pretty severe attack that had not been expected. People had not found that avenue of attack before. And so that really makes you lose some confidence in it. For example, the attacks on the lattice schemes, they're not a completely new idea that the Motsoff paper had. It was extending some ideas, optimizing some ideas that some other papers had done a line of research. So, of course, it's a little disconcerting to see that the attacks knock off some bits of security, but they didn't, alter the trajectory of where we see the overall security of lattices. If need be, we can tweak the parameters a little bit higher to make up for the small number of bits that are lost. But it is a worry. These attacks were not known a few years ago, and now they're known now. So I would say that is probably our biggest worry right now, is that it's an active research field, and it certainly is possible that people could discover new results to threaten what we standardize. That's also par for the course for cryptography. When RSA was first standardized a few decades ago, key sizes were a lot smaller. Attacks were discovered, and we now use larger parameters. So to some degree, that's what happens in the field of cryptography. Patents were also a big worry. I think we've got that a lot under control now, but they were definitely a big headache in the third round, especially because I'm a mathematician. I don't know anything about legal things like patents, and so it was a challenge to have to try and work on that.
Yeah, for sure. Another one. What your main expectation in round 4 for digital signatures? Are you expecting something new or better algorithm design? Not including, of course, structured lattice, but what are your expectation on that round 4?
So yeah, any signatures in round 4, as well as that new process we're starting looking for, calling for new signatures. It's a little bit challenging. We do want something that is small and fast, like the lattice-based signatures. On the other hand, when we look at what's out in the academic literature, there are not a lot of candidates that seem to fit that bill right now. So we're hoping to stimulate research in this field so that people will discover new ideas. There are some code-based signature ideas. There are some multivariate signatures that have not been broken and could be proposed. There are also some isogeny signatures that have been researched in the past few years. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what gets submitted to us. Right now, it looks like lattice signatures are going to be really, really good. And as a backup, we won't have anything that is quite as good as those lattice signatures. So hopefully we can spur some new research and find some things that will get close.
Thanks. A last question before I pass through my friends here. NIST and ITF already approved stateful hash-based signature schemes. So just a question: do you know some application that already is using maybe some code sign application, maybe in US or Europe or Asia, that already using XMSS, LMS in the real world?
Yeah, a couple that I'm aware of. I've heard IBM publicly talk about that they use hash-based signatures in some of their products. Some of their designers are those were on the team involved with that. As well as Germany has also said that they are using hash-based signatures in some of the satellites that are launching, because satellites are an example of something that they're putting into space. They're going to be there a long time, and so they need crypto that's already ready to go now that will provide protection for a long time. So they use stateful hash-based signatures in an application for protecting satellites. And I don't know the exact details, but I remember that was one use case that was mentioned.
Thanks very much, Dustin. Maurício, devolvo para você, para os nossos convidados aí também. Aproveitar.
Ok, Lacerda, muito obrigado aí pelas intervenções. Dustin, thank you for the answers. E agora eu vou convidar um grande parceiro nosso, o professor Jean Martina, o supervisor, coordenador do Laboratório de Segurança da Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina, e também já acumula aí alguma experiência na pesquisa desses algoritmos pós-quânticos, para ele, então, nos falar um pouco das suas impressões, e também aqui, professor, colocar algumas questões para o Dustin responder para a gente. Muito obrigado, a palavra está com você.
Ok, obrigado, Maurício. Eu vou começar dizendo que eu fiquei bastante contente, porque os slides que eu trouxe para apresentar aqui, grande parte são traduções do que o Dustin colocou. Então, como a gente vai disponibilizar os slides, vai ajudar para que a nossa comunidade aqui tenha mais facilidade, né, para acompanhar essa discussão. E então o foco do que eu gostaria de passar aqui é falar um pouco do que a gente está pensando, né, de como é que a gente sai da ICP Brasil hoje, né, que é uma ICP Brasil pré-quântica, para uma ICP Brasil que tenha capacidade de responder a ameaça, né, pós-quântica. Então, deixa eu ver se eu consigo avançar os slides, só um minutinho. Ok. Então, só para deixar claro aqui, né, a gente tem a versão aqui em português, eu tentei tratar de uma forma mais didática, né, para a audiência, o que o Dustin acabou de falar, né, enquanto o que é a criptografia pós-quântica, né. Então, é esse cenário onde que a gente está falando de uma coisa que é diferente do que é criptografia quântica, né. Também eu trouxe aqui para o pessoal entender qual que é a questão do problema, né, do algoritmo do Peter Shor e o algoritmo do Love Groover, né, que o que isso faz na prática? Na prática, ele quebra, né, os algoritmos como RSA, DSA e ECDSA, que são os algoritmos que estão padronizados hoje na ICP Brasil, tá? E ele também, né, o algoritmo do Groover, ele impacta os nossos algoritmos de hash, né, e de criptografia simétrica, que também são padronizados dentro de alguns modelos de trabalho na ICP Brasil. Tá? Eu gosto muito dessa figura aqui, né, que fala sobre uma timeline, né, porque a gente viveu praticamente até o momento, né, a gente está vivendo esse modelo do que a gente chama de criptossistemas pré-quânticos, né, onde que a gente tem lá RSA e sistemas baseados em curvas elípticas, e do lado direito aqui a gente tem os nossos sistemas que são com criptografia pós-quântica. A gente não, talvez, como o Dustin já falou, a gente não está no momento de pular do barco que está aqui na esquerda e ir para o barco da direita, mas a gente já tem que começar a ter preocupações, porque existem esses ataques, né, de eu coleto o dado agora e quebro ele depois, ou eu preciso de um tipo de proteção que tem que durar muito tempo e eu não sei se durante o tempo de vida útil dessa minha informação eu não vou ter alguma quebra do algoritmo que vai fazer com que a minha informação esteja exposta, né? Então, até para colocar aqui, né, é basicamente a mesma coisa que o Dustin colocou, né, o survey lá do Mosca. Então, a ideia é mais ou menos essa, que a gente tem pessoas que estudam o tema, elas acreditam que a gente tem ainda um certo espaço, né? Obviamente que, do ponto de vista de segurança nacional, a gente tem o texto aí que é dado pela NSA, né, no FAQ, sobre Quantum, do defense.gov, que a gente não sabe se vai sequer existir, mas aqui é muito provável de que exista. A questão, né, então, como o Dustin já tinha falado, é que a gente tem um possível ataque à autenticidade, né, e a gente tem ataques à confidencialidade. A ICP Brasil ela é muito baseada, né, na questão da autenticidade. Então, o que a gente, o grande problema, né, dos ataques que são providos por uma máquina quântica é que as nossas assinaturas digitais de documentos que a gente tem que guardar por um longo prazo, elas podem perder a confiança. Por quê? Porque esse algoritmo passa a ser explorado. Tá? E hoje aqui no Brasil a gente está produzindo, né, em nível nacional, uma série de documentos de guarda permanente. E esses documentos hoje são assinados com nossa criptografia pré-quântica e eles vão ter que ser repassados e encaminhados para esse modelo pós-quântico. Né? Aqui é mais ou menos a explicação como o Dustin tinha colocado lá sobre o que são os nossos algoritmos que são candidatos. Né? Então, o lattice lá são os reticulados, e a gente tem códigos de correção de erro, equações polinomiais multifaturadas e a questão de isogenia em curvas elípticas. Né? Eu vou acelerar aqui, né, porque toda essa parte já foi coberta pelo Dustin, mas o que eu acho que é importante dizer aqui, que é o que a gente está trabalhando no momento em termos de pesquisa no LabSec, é poder determinar como é que a gente vai pegar o ecossistema que existe hoje dentro da ICP Brasil e vai adaptar ele para funcionar, obviamente, após o surgimento dessa computação quântica, mas também como é que a gente vai fazer para que ele tenha um transicionamento que seja suave, entende? E que permita a gente estar protegido para essas questões. Então, para vocês terem uma ideia aí, né, quando a gente está falando de segurança de comunicação, né, algoritmos pré-quânticos, como algoritmos de curvas elípticas, né, a gente tem pelo menos duas ACs raízes, né, na ICP Brasil que utilizam algoritmos de curvas elípticas. A gente tem aí tamanhos de chaves pequenos, né, de 64 bytes. Quando a gente muda para alguns algoritmos com resistência pós-quântica, a gente tem um aumento do tamanho das chaves de forma considerável. E esse aumento dos tamanhos de chave, ele impacta em como que a gente pode, por exemplo, armazenar essas chaves em cartões, né, em smart cards ou em equipamentos específicos. A mesma coisa vale, né, para os algoritmos de assinatura. Né? A gente tem aí uma questão de um aumento significativo do processo. Aqui a gente está falando dos tamanhos de chave. Obviamente que isso tem que ser adicionado o tamanho da chave, o tamanho da assinatura e depois o tamanho do certificado digital que vai ter dentro desse processo. Então existem alguns impactos que devem mudar o panorama hoje na ICP Brasil, né, a forma como você entrega o certificado, a forma como o usuário guarda a sua chave, a forma como os documentos são assinados, o tamanho que os documentos passam a adquirir depois que eles vão tendo as assinaturas adicionadas a ele. Então, acho que essa é uma coisa importante. Né? A outra coisa, né, que a gente também tem trabalhado é que a gente entende que fazer esse salto, né, de criptografia clássica ou criptografia pré-quântica e a gente ir para um modelo estritamente com resistência ao computador quântico pode inviabilizar uma série de questões. Né, e a gente tem também a não definição ainda, né, dos padrões. Isso deve, como o Dustin já falou, deve levar aí pelo menos mais uns 2 anos, né, com exceção do que já está ali feito para hash-based signatures. E a gente tem estratégias, né, já inclusive discutidas, de como a gente faz para misturar, né, as duas coisas e acabar tendo um modelo de segurança interessante. Então, para vocês terem uma ideia, né, no LabSec a gente já fez experimentos, a gente já tem cadeias de certificação, autoridades certificadoras que permitem a gente emitir certificados digitais com os finalistas, né, com Rainbow, Dilithium e Falcon, né, para assinatura digital. Obviamente eu não recomendo que ninguém use Rainbow, né, por causa do ataque que foi falado aí, né, dá para quebrar ele com o laptop. Então, mas ao mesmo tempo a gente tem feito testes, né, de certificados com 2 chaves, né, sendo que uma chave é uma chave de curva elíptica e a outra chave é uma chave já pós-quântica, para quando você precisar, né, utilizar em alguma situação que você quer ter um documento de guarda de longo prazo, você possa fazer tanto uma assinatura que é reconhecida de forma convencional pelos sistemas atuais, quanto adicionar uma assinatura que vai te dar essa resistência, né, da integridade e da autoria, no caso aí, por um período maior, graças a essa resistência. A gente implementou com os vários algoritmos e fez testes, e a gente já sabe mais ou menos quais são os impactos que a gente vai ter nos documentos. Tá? Obviamente que quando a gente vai para esse modo híbrido, né, a ideia é que a gente possa combinar uma parte pré e uma parte pós-quântica, né, e ele permanece seguro enquanto ao menos um deles não for quebrado. Então, se o algoritmo que a gente escolheu, né, pós-quântico, que não está padronizado, mas surgiu um ataque, ele for quebrado, a gente ainda tem o nosso pré-quântico aí funcionando. Né? E assim a gente consegue ter essa evolução, né, e num modelo onde a gente não dá um salto muito grande. E os pontos positivos, né, de a gente estudar modelos híbridos é que a gente cria um modelo de transição que não é disruptivo. A gente também trabalha com muita confiança na criptografia que a gente tem hoje, que é o que embasa tudo. Né? Como o Dustin falou, a gente ainda está resolvendo problemas físicos e de engenharia para ter um computador quântico, então talvez não faça sentido essa desconfiança que a gente tem no momento. Né? A gente também tem um grande nível de escrutínio em software, a gente tem modelos de regulação e conformidade. E como pontos negativos, né, de se trabalhar um modelo híbrido, a gente tem esse custo computacional, né, então eu tenho que gerar 2 chaves, eu tenho que assinar 2 vezes e tal, o que pode causar alguns problemas. Né? Mas é importante que modelos híbridos assim permitem que a gente possa trabalhar de acordo com a ameaça que a gente está percebendo naquele momento. Né? Um outro ponto negativo é que, dependendo do que a gente está fazendo, né, talvez a assinatura digital é um exemplo simples, mas quando a gente está fazendo estabelecimento de chaves ou outras coisas, a forma como a gente combina a criptografia pré-quântica e a pós-quântica é muito determinante para o resultado de segurança que a gente vai ter. Tá? E, obviamente, quando a gente passa a ter mais algoritmos, a gente tem que transmitir mais objetos criptográficos, e isso pode pesar um pouco a comunicação. Ainda aqui, mais para finalizar, para poder conversar um pouco com o Dustin, né, quando a gente está falando sobre híbrido, um negócio interessante que eu trouxe aqui é o experimento da Cloudflare. Né, eles fizeram um experimento onde que eles fizeram a comunicação em TLS, né, utilizando um algoritmo pré-quântico e um algoritmo de curvas elípticas, né, o X25519, e dependendo do que eles fizeram lá, né, eles chegaram à conclusão de que combinar esses algoritmos pode gerar, né, aqui como eles falaram, um avestruz, né, que é grande e... Deixa eu lembrar qual que era o texto lá. Um avestruz, né, que é grande e pesado, desculpa, grande e rápido, ou um peru, né, que é pequeno, mas lerdo, né, no caso. Então, a gente tem que cuidar porque, às vezes, a gente não quer nem o peru, nem o avestruz. Né, e isso é o que a gente tem estudado no momento. Obviamente que a gente também tem outras possibilidades, né, que fazer combinação não só de criptografia clássica e pós-quântica, mas também trabalhar modelos com criptografia já quântica, né? São algoritmos que só executam quando a gente tem um computador quântico. Então, concluindo aqui, né, eu queria dizer que a gente tem diversas possibilidades, né, e espaços de contribuição hoje que a gente tem trabalhado na análise de segurança, implementação, protocolos, aplicações. Né? A gente tem trabalhado muito com a questão do desempenho da criptografia pós-quântica, que é algo que ainda a ser estudado, né, o desempenho dela no mundo real, e também como que a gente pode projetar o uso dessa dessa criptografia em ambientes heterogêneos, né, coisas novas que estão acontecendo. Tá? E, então, concluindo isso, eu queria I'll switch to English so that I can ask Dustin a question. Dustin, how does NIST sees these hybrid switching ideas? And you said that you plan to produce standards for PQC in the next 2 or 3 years. How long are you? Do you believe you'll be taking to plan on standards for us to have hybrids, for example?
Yeah, so the question about hybrid, that's an ongoing discussion that's happening a lot right now. NIST, I don't think we are going to end up making any final decision on whether or not you should use hybrid. We think that industry will decide, various applications will decide for themselves on if hybrid makes sense or not. We're helping people understand the conversation and making sure they understand the advantages and the disadvantages. And it makes sense to us. It certainly seems reasonable to transition with hybrid. But I think it's unlikely that NIST will make any final decision and say, this is what everybody has to do. I will mention the NSA, the National Security Agency, they've already put forth a public statement that they do not think that they need to use hybrid algorithms. They want to transition straight to the post-quantum algorithms without any hybrid for a variety of reasons. So I think there's different viewpoints that people have. Most people that we talk to, I think, seem to agree it makes sense, but not necessarily everyone. So we're seeing different people work on that. In the IETF, there's various RFCs and internet drafts for exactly how to do a hybrid, depending on whether you're doing signatures or you're doing certificates or which protocol you're doing. NIST will probably have some guidance, but it won't be any kind of mandated way that you have to do hybrid.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. I'll pass back to Maurício.
Thank you, Dustin. Obrigado, professor Jean. Estamos nos aproximando aqui do nosso horário. Vou passar, então, aqui a palavra para o nosso último convidado, Roberto Galo, também parceiro nosso aí de grande tempo já. Galo, por favor, faça uso da palavra para deixar suas impressões e também fazer uma interação com o Dustin, por favor.
Em primeiro lugar, muito obrigado. Dustin, congratulations on your presentation. It was really smooth, to say so. Thank you very much. I will go through a few things in Portuguese to be faster, then I will switch to English to ask you directly, okay? So we'll show my presentation very briefly. My idea here is just to remember a little bit. If you look back from the 70s and take a look the time it took to crack or to break or to kill an algorithm, usually you have a time window of around 10 years. I'm talking here about symmetric mostly, of course. But if you look to the past as a way to tell you to tell the future, what we see is that algorithms do not tend to last too long. That's the point. Maybe 10 years is more or less the time. So when you come from this idea with the paper from Mosca, which Justin just showed us, or you see what the experts on quantum computers think that a computer will be there, you can see that maybe the greater risk comes from breaking the algorithm with advancement in cryptanalysis than the quantum computer itself. That's, in my opinion, is the greatest risk that you have. So when it comes to composing hybrid schemes, I would say that if you are very conservative, if you're talking about things that cannot be changed, a satellite, national security matter, or the root CA of the national PKI. Maybe a hybrid is the only way to go. And maybe you are going to be hybrid, not because you are using a classical algorithm and a post-quantum algorithm. Maybe you are using two post-quantum algorithms, actually, at the end of the day, because you really reduce the chance that something goes really wrong with this kind of machine. This is one of the earlier quantum computers. One thing that so it all boils down to how assured are you that this algorithm is good? If you take round 1 to round 2, 1/4 to 1/3 of the algorithms have fallen. If you move to round 2 to round 3, is more or less the same thing, about 1/3, 1/4, 1/3. And if you see the new attacks on the OW and etc., it's more or less about 1/3 again. So if you take a step back, and see the overall scenario, what you see is that yes, probably at the end of the day we'll have really some really conservative, strong, robust algorithms such as Sphinx Plus and Michaelis. They are there for a while, and maybe they are their way to go. So at the end of the day, when you're implementing things, you need to choose. I mean, I'm always still with the things that I trust. They work somehow, or change for new ideas. And this choice in some cases are obvious, and in the other cases are not. Personally, with my background working with defense or national security, I always go for the most conservative choice, which in this specific case are, in my opinion, in terms of confidentiality, which is one of the main subjects, is Michaelis, combined with something that we have sufficient trust. The point is that crypto, I like very much this picture, because crypto is like an egg. If you use it a little bit wrong, it breaks. So it boils down to the implementation. Jean Martina just mentioned that if you use things in one way, it can be less secure. If you do something wrong, you lose all the performance. And that's the truth. I mean, I really like this image. You can only use crypto in the way it was exactly intended to be used. But this is a problem, because usually the crypto services or the software or the hardware that implement crypto is absolutely in the wrong abstraction level for developers. So it's very, very, very common to have developers using crypto wrongly, because the abstraction level is completely wrong. So this is one of the things that we learned in the past. So I will most ending. The second point is that still in this matter, most of the time we don't have implementations or pieces of software which are educational enough to be used by the average. I would like to say the average Joe at the end of the line. So my question to Dustin is our two. First, do you think? I mean, can you share a little bit more information about NCCOE? I mean, do you help at the end of the day? Do you help with the practical implementations, or are more on the white paper side? I mean, reference implementations are good, in my opinion, as long as I have practical use cases with them. But I would like to hear more about you. And the second thing is, if we had a similar graph as you showed from Mosca research about the likelihood of having a quantum computer, do you think that the trust on the algorithms will be better or worse in terms of risk when compared to the likelihood of a quantum computer being present. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I agree with the points you made in your presentation. Yeah, crypto algorithms don't last forever. People come up with ideas that break them, and so we need to be careful with that. Yeah, your first question was on the NCCOE and that project, and you asked about implementations. I don't think the NCCOE project is going to produce implementations. It's focused on kind of other aspects. There are libraries that have implementations. Each submission team has implementations as well that are on our website, both a kind of a reference version and optimized version. And there are libraries like PQ Clean or Open Quantum Safe that also have been developing implementations. The NCCOE is a little bit more focused on white papers, guidebooks, guidance. Right now, what they're looking to do first is in partnering with some other organizations that are joining the project, develop tools that will help you figure out what cryptography you're using and what information you're protecting and kind of which crypto systems, so you'll know what needs to be replaced and things like that. So that's the first thing the NCCOE is doing. Did that answer enough of that question about that? Or?
Definitely, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And then the second question, you talked about the confidence in the algorithms and the risk that they have. That's a tough one to answer. There's always risk with crypto algorithms. We cannot guarantee that someone will not break it, someone will not discover an attack. And as you pointed out, that's the case whether we're looking at quantum safe algorithms or not, whether we're looking at symmetric key algorithms or not. So the post-quantum project the goal of it was to get a whole lot of focus and attention so that we can have more confidence in some algorithms, get a lot more confidence. And I think that's worked, especially in the case where we see a lot of attacks and breaks. We see things that are not secure. And the algorithms that survive, particularly in the case of lattices, there have been a few attacks, but there have also been a lot of advancements in understanding the security behind them. And we're a lot more confident in the security of lattices than we were 5 years ago. We definitely need to choose parameters so that they're conservative, but we understand them and we feel pretty good about the security of lattices as well. The NSA has also backed us up on that, and they said they are also happy with the state of the lattices. You're right, if you want to be very conservative, there are other algorithms like Sphinx Plus and Classic McLeese that are widely viewed as perhaps even more secure because they've been around for longer and the analysis behind them is also pretty well understood. So yeah, definitely there are some risks, but we feel confident in the algorithms that we will select that people will be able to use them for at least a decade or two.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ok, obrigado, Galo, pela sua participação. Dustin, uma vez mais, muito obrigado, thank you. With that, we come to the end of our panel. We hope to have managed to draw everyone's attention to the importance from on to the topic. So, we thank you once more, Dustin. We appreciate very much your participation. Hope to see you next year in presence in Brasilia to tell us about the standardization process. And thank you once more. Jean, Lacerda already left us. Galo, muito obrigado. Fortune, se quiser fazer uma fala final institucional, passo a palavra para você.
Dustin, thank you very much for your presence. Galo, obrigado aí pela participação. O João Martina, obviamente, nosso parceiro de sempre, né? Muito obrigado. O Lacerda já foi, ele tinha um compromisso com o ministro, ele teve que sair. Bom, eu acho que o painel foi bastante interessante, muito técnico, claro, né? Para quem nos assistiu, tenho certeza que acrescentou bastante para uma visão de futuro, que vai acontecer em breve, o fim está próximo. Como disse o Dustin, the end is near. É isso aí. Muito obrigado a todos. Eu devolvo para a Juliana. Juliana.
Muito obrigada.